Today's the day where I'm going to teach you guys how to fix anything that doesn't go your way or anything that kind of screws up along the way, and how to fix them pretty easy and pretty quickly. I've got multiple different things to fix on this van and add to it. So this video is going to touch into a little bit of that, but I'm going to go through and show you my mistakes. That way you guys can I can teach you guys how to prevent them, for one, and two, if you do go down this road and you want to do it later on, you're able to do that as well. So this weekend I was able to get the van all cleaned up, all taped up, and clear coated. It's been 2 days since I clear coated it. I clear coated it on Sunday around a little after noonish, about 1 o'clock, I would say. And then Monday evening after work, I came in, started prepping everything. I got about 90% done, I would say. Right now, it just needs to be kind of cleaned off again and just looked over, hit any spots that I didn't hit all the way, and get the shiny stuff knocked down a little bit more than what it already is, if there is any. And then just kind of fine comb it and go through and kind of DA it down a little bit more if it does need that. But I hit it pretty good yesterday, so it might not need much of anything but a little bit of Scotch-Brite in here and there. So I'm going to walk you guys through that process and let you guys see what it looks like right now. So right now it's just pretty flat again. Like I said, I've already went through majority of prepped it. So this is what the side of the van currently looks like. Obviously there's going to be a ton more added to the lettering, but you could tell that just in some of these cracks and crevices are a little too shiny for my liking, even though I hit them with the Scotch-Brite yesterday. That's one thing about not having a booth to kind of bake everything in once you do something. You're kind of playing the waiting game. So like when I cleared this, it was obviously midday. It was probably about 50 degrees outside. It's been a little warm here, which is kind of strange for us right now. Usually it's like 5 degrees outside and snowing. So it's been a little bit warmer. What I did was I put kind of like a half a coat, just kind of really tack coat over all the artwork. And then once that was finally set and dry and ready for the next coat, I put 2 more coats after that over just the artwork. And then I let that all, every coat I let flash off, obviously. I don't want to go in there and hammer it and just keep hammering it. So you want to let it flash off every time over artwork first, because that is on top of the surface. That's the layer on top of the van that's not clear coated already. So I want to get that knocked down to where it's almost flat once it's dry and ready for sanding. So you want to try to get as much clear on those areas as possible and kind of just feather them out, if you will. You don't want to just sit there and only hit the areas, so you want to kind of feather it out when you're clearing those. But you want to be really, really careful, because if you do have candy paint on the artwork, it don't matter if it's underneath something, over top of something. If there is candy paint on the surface and you go and hammer it, and what happens is when that clear, you hammer that clear on the first time or the third time or whatever time it is, it will bite into that candy. And if it's not, if it's not warm, but it's like it was here, like 50 degrees, it was probably about 60, 65 in here. If I would have hammered it, it would have bit into that candy. And what it does is that clear, when it flows out, it'll bite into it and it'll drag the color down with it. And then it's game over. You pretty much have to redo everything. So that's the trick to clear an artwork. I've seen it happen a couple times with base coat, but it takes a lot for base coat to drag it. With candy, it can happen really easily. So you want to be careful when you're clearing artwork. There is a little bit of a trick to it, but that first coat, you just want to let it kind of tack on there. Almost look like it's not even covered all the way. Just kind of mist it on there a little bit to where it's not rough, but it's not totally wet. And then let that tack off fully. And then usually after that, you're pretty good because it's settled, it's locked in. But there are sometimes you want to be careful not hammer it. So that's the trick to that. So I did pretty much like 2.5 coats over just the artwork, and then I did 2 coats over the entire van. So That may seem like a lot of clear, but when I was going over the van, I wasn't really hitting it really hard either. I was just doing it so that way everything was locked in, because when you're clearing something like this, you can't just clear the artwork, let it dry, sand it, and then go on about your business, because you'll see a nasty halo around everywhere that you did not put clear. So you want to make sure you get enough on everything. That way when you sand it, you don't burn through the clear you just put on, because then you'll have nightmares and you'll have to put the original color back on the vehicle. So that is the trick to doing that. So yeah, it's just 2 coats over the artwork, half of a coat over it to kind of lock it in there, first coat, and then 2 coats over the entire van, and then I let it sit for 24 hours and came back in and started sanding it. There's just a couple areas that need to be hit, kind of like right here. It's not totally smooth. It's smooth to the touch, but I want to try to get it flat as I can, because we are going to go through and pinstripe a lot of this stuff, do a lot of coloring and things like that, and fixing stuff here and there. But I'm going to show you guys this engine cover I did. I haven't even sanded it. This is just the way it was after I cleared it. You can kind of tell what it looks like clear coated, which is going to look really cool. Came out really nice. There are a couple dirt nibs I'm going to hit on this, but I'm going to sand this down and add a little bit to it as well as far as detail go, and then we'll re-clear it. But all that stuff will get knocked down. That came out really good though. So the van pretty much looked like this. So that way give you guys an idea of how awesome this thing's gonna look. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. I'm gonna go ahead, go through, hit the areas I need to hit, clean everything off, and I'll come back to you guys and we'll explain what we're gonna do. So everything got sanded again. Hit the spots. What you really want to do is try to find the spots that are shiny and knock them down, because you want that that next coat of whatever you're going to put on, that top coat, to bite into it. That way it doesn't peel off. So just double check everything, go back over it if you need to multiple times, and then obviously blow it off and clean it. So this is cleaned. It's still drying. You can see the streaks still drying. So one thing I want to kind of tell you guys, when you're doing artwork and you're building layers and you're trying to, a lot of vehicles in my area that I see that have artwork on them, or like lettering or anything like that that's been cleared over, a lot of them don't even try to bury it to where you can't fill anything. Now to me that's not really good enough, I guess you could say. I know a lot of guys are picky on that custom touch of everything. When you look down the car, it's slick as glass, and that's kind of how I do things. I don't like to just clear them and just, you know, you see the outline where everything was taped off at when you clear it. I want everything perfectly smooth. That way when you look down the side of the car, it looks like it's actually built into the paint job of the car. So when you're doing this stuff and you got multiple layers going on, such as the side of where the lettering is on this, the first round of clear that you do, whether you do 2 coats or 4 or maybe 5, you don't necessarily, you're pretty much not going to bury it all on the first round. So you want to try to, when you're sanding this stuff, you want to be the better judgment of like, hey, how far should I go, or how deep can I go, because you don't want to get into that color. So you gotta kind of judge it on how heavy handed you are when you spray your clear versus how much you can actually sand off and get it flat. Like for me on this, I didn't really spray too heavy. Like I said, it was kind of cold, so I didn't want it to run or anything on me. And then so I was pretty careful with it, which means like some of the areas on this van that have the artwork aren't totally buried already. So which is fine, because like I said, you're not going to bury. It's very unlikely that you're going to get away with burying everything on the first try, especially if you have like pinstriping or anything really gnarly, like a gnarly edge or anything like that. There are tools out there to where you can buy to kind of scrape the edges down, but when you're doing like a candy on top of a silver, if you end up using that tool, I found out that it just takes away the candy and you can see that nasty edge. So you don't really want to do that on candy, and you got to be really careful what you choose to do and what you not want to do. So on this one, there's certain areas that are not fully flat. Most of it is though, and on this one, it's pretty much just the lettering. The lettering that was cut out and, you know, pretty much stencilized on here is where it wasn't really, you know, it's not totally flat. So like back here, this was already done. The silver was done. It was pretty thick, so it's not totally buried yet. It's close, but like I said, you don't want to burn through it because you don't want to go backwards, so you just want to get it as flat as you can. And then the lettering up here, obviously we masked that off, and now we're to the area, or to the point of getting everything to where it's ready for that next layer of paint. So here is where the video is going to start kicking in for you guys as far as what the title is going to be about. The lettering on here, you know, if you went back and saw the videos, I did everything by hand, drew it on, cut it out, everything. The original idea was to keep some of that original van blue showing through on some of the face of the letters, and doing the back, you know, the shadowing the back of the letters in silver like they are. But when the customer got here, I had the silver done and I had the faces of the letters peeled off, ready for that next color and shading to go onto it, and he just didn't like the blue popping through. I think it was just too dark for him, so we decided that he wanted to put a full color on it. We did some scenarios that didn't really work out for him, and this kind of where things kind of got tricky for me because of the color that was chosen. So there's a method to doing everything as far as painting goes, and when you're told one thing and then you have to go back and do something totally different, you've already got some of it done, that means you got to go back and kind of backtrack and figure it out, which this wasn't a big deal, but it did kind of make some issues. So I'm going to show you guys those here real quick, on the issues that came to be on this side of the van, because you're going to see really quickly what I'm talking about. As far as doing something in a candy, it's got to be, you know, silver underneath of it, gold underneath of it. Something has to go underneath of it to bring out that candy. Candy is a transparent base, and when you put silver underneath of it, it just kind of covers it. And the dark, you know, the more you put on, the darker it gets. So the method to this, if I knew that, I would have done everything in silver without, you know, having the face of the letters peeled up or masked off, which would mean that the silver would be fully covered on everything, and that way everything would be locked in at once. But on this side, since I already had the letters taped up, that means they were blue. So I had to go back through, tape everything off letter-wise, and then I had to spray silver, and then I had to spray the candy, which made it really, really thick. Now you might say, well, why'd that happen? Because you already had the silver on there. Well, because if I would have known this, I would have done it all in silver and then masked the letters off and spray candy, and then I wouldn't have the issues that I had, because the issues that I had were simply blow-throughs. Some areas where the tape did not like that I was taping up the silver and it didn't adhere when I sprayed the silver. There's just issues a little bit here and there, and then some of my taping skills here weren't really that great to begin with. So I'm not really too worried about the edges, like especially like this one, things like this up here, things like this, because the letters are going to get pinstriped, which means all this stuff, everything around the red is going to get covered. So I'm not really too worried about like a blow through like that or anything like that. You're gonna have some of that stuff. So the only things I'm really worried about are like the red back here where we're not gonna touch the silver at. This right here, I don't know what happened here, but it was just really weird that the red went through there, and then same way right here. So I'm gonna go through, we're gonna fix the silver first. So we're gonna do all this masked off the silver. Even like right here, I was not gonna really worry about that because the pin strap's gonna cover that and all this nasty stuff. So I'm not really too worried about the red part of it. It's more or less the silver pieces that we're gonna go ahead and fix. just that way we can get them done before we go on to the next phase. And then on this lightning bolt, as you can see, there was a yellow spot right there that drove me nuts. And then when I was spraying the black, for some reason, the black out of the airbrush, it just speckled everything and spit. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna mask this bolt up, and we're gonna mask the silver up in some of these areas where the red is coming through, and we're gonna spray that silver. Like stuff like this, it's just gonna take a dust of it, and then we'll go back through and do the highlights and, you know, the shadows the way they need to be without all the spitting on it. So it's not really that difficult to fix. It's gonna be pretty easy paint-wise. It's only gonna take a few minutes, but the masking might take a little bit longer. But I just wanna show you guys the mistakes that you may run into when you're doing something like this. And this is just all because I had to go through and fine line everything against the silver and then spray that silver, which really built it up higher than the silver that was on it originally. And then that candy, it takes a lot of coats for that candy to cover, so it just made it super thick. So there was just adhesion problems, I guess you would say, in some of these areas where, you know, I peeled the tape up and it just did not like sticking to that silver that was underneath of it already, which, you know, sometimes like that stuff happens. So you just gotta roll with it. I decided to clear it anyways, because once it's cleared, I can take thinner to it, I can take whatever to it, and it's not gonna burn through it as long as you're careful with it. And then I could tape on it and not have to worry about paint peeling up or anything like that. And it's gonna get pinstriped, like I said, and it's gonna have some shadowing in it. So all that stuff can be wiped off if I need to be, if it is that bad of a deal, to where I mess something up again or whatever. So that's one reason why you wanna lock everything in. If you're like, I would say about 80 to 90% of the way done, if you're doing a lot of work like this, especially if you're pinstriping. If you're pinstriping, you definitely need to clear coat your artwork first, whether it be graphics or if you're doing lettering like this. I would highly suggest clear coating any of the artwork first, sanding as flat as you can once the clear coat's dry, and then cleaning it up and then doing your pinstripes. Because what happens is when you're starting to build these edges up and you don't clear them, these edges can be really thick sometimes depending on what paint you're spraying. And when you go through and pinstripe that line, if you're not really careful of doing against the edge, if you go right on top of that edge, that pinstripe paint, it will bleed through and it'll hit that edge. And when you clear it, you will see that edge through the pinstripe paint. So that's the reason why we clear coat this stuff and try to get as flat as possible. So when we put that pinstripe paint down, it will be perfectly smooth. You won't see anything underneath of it. Pinstripe paint's pretty thick to begin with, but there have been times where I have done it without clear coating artwork, and I've seen that line come through, and it's just, a lot of people don't notice it, especially when it's out in the sun. But for me, I'm just picky like that, so I always do like at least a couple of coats of clear over my graphics to bury them, and then we can pinstripe it. So that's the plan. So we're gonna get these things taped up, sprayed some silver on, and then go through and touch everything else up. All right, so once you get everything outlined the way you need it, you gotta go back through here. And I always, what you wanna do when you're doing something straight edge, you always wanna overlap it a little bit. The tape I have here is a crepe tape. It's the same exact thing as my gold mask, the FBS gold mask. It's just in tape form. So you can see right through it where that red is. So what you need to do, like I said, make sure you go overlap a little bit. So the outsides you don't have to worry about. Make sure you got all the edges fine. But the insides, this tape needs cut. So now all you gotta do is ride right along that silver underneath of it. And you don't have to really do too much to it to get it to go. As long as you get a fresh blade, it works out pretty good. And with the fresh blade, you really don't have to put any pressure down on it. You just want to kind of glide it across, especially if you're using this FBS gold mask. It is super thin. So you want to be really careful with it when you're cutting that stuff. So I went ahead and did this, and then also I taped up the lettering of where it needs fixed in the spots. So I'm going to go through, cut all this out, and then we'll outline in a tape. And then what I'll do is I'll just run a plastic sheeting over most of this. That way all the silver, because silver overspray with the metallics and stuff that are in it, it will go everywhere. So you want to make sure you mask it off really, really well. So I got everything taped off, outlined, and then cut with plastic, outlined again. And as you can tell, I mean, it's barely, you can still see the purple underneath the tape. So it doesn't take much. Just takes a little bit of paint to cover that because it's already clear coated, so it doesn't take much to cover those mistakes. You kind of see the shadowing still on the lightning bolt where I highlighted and shadowed it. So we're going to go through and do that next, but everything came out really good as far as all the mistakes that we needed to fix. So we're going to let this portion just sit here and dry, because if you know anything about painting and being kind of cold, not where it's really, really hot out or anything, even though we're spraying solvent, you want to give it the time to dry, because if you do peel it up too fast, there is a chance that it might peel again. So just want to let that sit there as long as it needs to sit there, and then we're gonna go over this and do the highlights and shadows again. And what we're doing here is we're just going to make it look like the objective is just to make it look like it's got like a reflection in it, because it's silver. The silver is really bright. So what I did was I took a really over reduced black, and I just shadowed it on one edge, and then the other side I did a really over reduced white, and I shadowed it on this side. So the sun's coming this way, it's hitting these edges right here, that's why they're white, and then it's casting a shadow back here, and it pulls that effect off. So I need to find my tack rag real quick, and we're going to tack this thing off to get any overspray off that we need to get, and get this done. And then what we'll do to this side is we're going to let it sit probably overnight, because there's nothing else that we need to do to this side. These letters inside of here are going to get some shadowing and stuff as well, so I might peel those up, I don't know just about yet, but it's going to get the same effect as what this is going to get. I really wanted to add some color in there to the silver, but the customer, he has decided to do just a shadowing technique with just a really over reduced black. I thought it would be pretty cool to do like some color in here, just that way it's casting some shadows in there, maybe blue or something like that. So I'm gonna get to mixing up my over reduced black that I got here. It's pretty much like a dark gray, but I'm gonna do a little bit more drops of black in there. We're gonna get this thing airbrushed. And there you have it. You can see the white casting a shadow over here, and then the over reduced black over here. It does not take very much, guys. It takes very little. You want it to give it that illusion that it's kind of like a chrome, and you don't need to really hog on a lot of paint while doing this to pull this off. So that is my only key tip. Is I always say over reduce your paint a lot. Now my airbrushes are pretty much all of them, I've got a lot of microns pretty much. So if you know anything about a lot of microns, their needles are very, very small. So the head's very small. So I have to over reduce my paint a lot to get it to run through those airbrushes and to get details like I do. And so when I'm doing stuff like this, I do about the same method. I just over reduce it, because I do not want to go and just blast a lot of paint, especially like a black, because once you go too dark too fast, it's hard to go back. You would have to go back through and spray this all silver again, and then do all the white and the black again. It's just a mess. So you want to really just take your time, don't use the full color, reduce everything as much as possible when doing this. If you're, and this goes for like any drop shadows you're going to do, anything you're wanting to do as far as shadowing goes, over reduce it. If you need to build it up and do a couple passes, that's perfectly fine, because you would rather do a couple passes than go too dark too quick and have to go back through and do it all over again. And for those of you that are wondering if this is going to make a line when I peel this up, it shouldn't make too much of a line. You're obviously going to feel the difference, but it's so light. Like, you still see the yellow tape underneath that silver. So my guess, it's going to be really, really subtle if there is going to be a line. So you're really not going to notice it. But we're going to be clear coating this thing all over again once we get all the pinstriping and things on anyways. So it's not going to really matter, because I'm just going to bury it again. So as long as you do everything and prep everything right and get everything smooth and go back through and do your touch-ups, you're not going to have pretty much any issues. Now, if you don't prep anything right and you still have shiny spots and you put tape on there and you put paint over that and you go peel your tape up and it peels that paint up as well, that's because you didn't prep it correctly. So you want to make sure all your shiny stuff is pretty much knocked down before you go through and do all this stuff. That way when you peel your tape up, you don't have any problems like I did on the lettering. I don't know why exactly that happened. Maybe I did peel the tape up way too soon and it peeled it in some spots, but I think it's from bonding, because that silver was on those letters for a while, like pretty much a day and a half before we went over and did the lettering of the faces. So that silver had probably set up already, and when I sprayed the silver for the faces, it did not bond to that silver that was already on the car, and it just decided to peel up. So that was the only thing that I could come up with as far as why it would do something like that. But you just, you know, if you need to, a lot of guys like to use Intercoat Clear. It's pretty much locks everything down the same. Now, the reason why the lettering, I haven't explained this part of it. The lettering part, the reason why I clear coated it without fixing it before I clear coated it is because it's a candy paint. And candy paint, if you put anything over top of it, it just absorbs every single color. So it almost like for like a silver, for instance, silver is pretty much like white. So if I would just spray silver on this and paint it over the red candy, it would pretty much would have died back and ate through that and turned it pink. So that's why I went ahead and clear coated it and just decided to do touch-ups after I clear coated it, because I didn't want to have to fight that, you know, that pigment coming through that silver and making it pink. So I locked it in there. Intercoat Clear does the same thing. You can put a couple of coats of Intercoat Clear on there and let it dry. Go through and do all your touch-ups that way too. It's not as thick as clear, but it's just a barrier to where you can put against something to kind of block out that to where it won't bleed through. I just didn't have any, so I just went ahead and cleared everything. So pretty much that is it, guys, as far as touch-ups on this side. Obviously we got to do the pinstriping and all that stuff, and there's some other things on the other side we got to do as far as like adding detail and things like that before we do all the pinstripes. But other than that, this is pretty much it. So I'm gonna end the video here. It's probably pretty long already, but if you have any questions, comment down below. I can answer them as quickly as I can once I see them. And yeah, just take your time, and you know, it will help in your benefit. If you the slower you go, the better. Let your paint dry and you won't have any of these issues. But if you do, this is a good way to do it. So see you on the next one.